Alright, so in a previous episode, we mentioned that this year James has ended up working on a lot of competitive games, but in the course of that, he's also ended up working on a lot of collectible games. And let me tell you, collectible games are something James loves. In fact, working on collectible card games was one of the first gaming gigs James ever got. But almost every time he consults on one of these things, somebody in a suit inevitably brings up Rage of Bahamut. I don't do this very often, but look, Rage of Bahamut is not a good game. It's not what we should be modeling all of our future collectible games on. All it really does is show the power of collectability as a monetization model. In terms of actual game design, it's little more than a giant Skinner box. Rather than showing us why collectability can be used to make a more engaging game, Rage of Bahamut just points us to a very insidious path that free-to-play could take. A path that, without a doubt, would do a lot of damage to the emerging free-to-play market, and the industry as a whole, just for some short-term gains. So today and next week, we want to talk about the collectible method of monetization, why it's becoming ever more popular, and how it can be used well. So first off, how do we define a game that uses collectible monetization? Well, for our purposes, it's any game where you purchase game objects not in distinct increments, but in randomized lots that are a subset of a larger pool, whose members have each been assigned a predetermined likelihood of appearance. That's a pretty formal definition. Let me try that again in human speak. It's any game where you buy characters or gear in randomized packs, where the characters and gear come from some larger pool of characters and gear, and certain characters or pieces of gear are less likely to appear than others. For example, things sold in boosters, like Magic the Gathering. Okay, so why do we care? What does monetizing through these random packs do for developers that just standard free-to-play doesn't? Well, first off, it solves two huge problems with your standard free-to-play monetization model. The first of these is that not every player will want everything you have to sell. Very often, as a free-to-play game creator, you'll either just make a bad item that no one wants to buy, or you'll make an item that only part of your market is interested in. This means that you've spent all the money to create the asset, but you can only sell it to a part of your market, unless they don't know what they're getting. Imagine an RPG in which you're playing as a mage, and the developers come out with some really cool ranger bow. Well, you don't care. You simply aren't a customer for that item. But in a collectible game, surprise, that bow is the rare item in the pack you bought. Now, you're a customer. And you can't really complain because, hey, that's the luck of the draw. But, I mean, it is a pretty cool bow, and it is purple and all. Who knows, maybe you'll end up rolling a ranger now and getting that much deeper into the game just to use that awesome item you got. So there's the first problem collectible monetization solves for developers. 100% of your audience are now customers for 100% of what you have to sell. The second thing collectible monetization does is to get players to buy non-consumable items multiple times. As a developer on a standard free-to-play game, when you create a new item to sell, unless it's a consumable, you can usually only sell it to each player once. I mean, how many times are you going to buy Nidalee or the Rux voice pack? Once will probably do the trick. But not so with the collectible model. Anyone who plays Magic knows how many spare commons they have lying around, how many piles of unused and unwanted chimney imps they have stowed somewhere in a closet or a binder. Many Magic players who spend a fair amount on the game don't even look at the commons they buy anymore, and yet they are buying them. Wizards would have a hard time charging $5 a piece for boosters if all those boosters contained was one card, and yet for most players, functionally they might as well. In collectible games, the developers can sell players the objects they've made over and over again, regardless of whether those players actually want those things specifically. This is a huge benefit in terms of monetizing a game. What's more, in the digital age, we've eliminated one of the biggest problems with this part of collectible design. You see, in the physical realm, with every pack of cards you opened, there was a greater chance for disappointment. The more packs you opened, the more cards you had, so the less cards you needed, thus more packs were increasingly likely to have nothing you needed in them, and thus be disappointing. And that's clearly the opposite engagement curve you want the player to have. As a player gets more invested in the game, you want them to simply get more excited to put in more money. So today, any digital collectible game worth its salt lets you crunch your excess cards and turn them into fuel to power up the cards you want, or currency to buy more cards, or parts to get unique cards that you can't even get from the packs. All of a sudden, voila! One of the main issues with a collectible model in the paper realm disappears. Or if not disappears, at least becomes much less pronounced. There are other ways the collectible model benefits the free-to-play developer too, as well as a number of ways the model can risk turning exploitive, and we'll talk about those next week. See you then!